Hey everyone, my name is Stephen Fuller. I am a grad student for the UGA LLD program. This course is the DE&I program course, and I'm here today with Michelle. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Michelle Moore. I am also a grad student at the University of Georgia in the Learning, Leadership, and Organization Development program.
Awesome. I just want to call out the fact that we do have a very big demographic gap between us. I think that our intersectionalities that we've kind of explored through our papers and then just through talking with each other prior to the meeting, we come from different, different ages, different generations, different experiences. So I'm really excited to have and host this kind of conversation between the both of us, and just super excited to learn about your lived experiences and kind of, get to the bottom of this case study. So the case study that we read was about an individual named Miguel, who had been considered an A-star for a team. He was an engineer of some sorts, and throughout his life, as he had kind of come into his own, he started to realize that his perceived gender didn't match his born gender. And then he had come out to some close family and friends. It took a while for him to even get to that level of self-confidence and acceptance. And then at that point, he began to begin the medical transitioning process, which includes the hormone therapy, things like that. And immediately when he tried to reintroduce himself in the workforce as Michelle in her new identity, she faced a lot of scrutiny from her peers. She also got some really homophobic and kind of disgusting notes that was left on her desk. And ultimately, she wound up being fired by her employer because her employer said that her clients would be uncomfortable with someone that's transgender. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Definitely.
So I guess just what kind of stood out immediately after we had read this case, to you?
For me, I was mostly surprised that an organization would let somebody go for being transgender. I live in California, and we have protections, solid protections, and they've been in place for quite a while, right? I know that, we did talk a little bit about this, the Supreme Court ruling for the Bostick versus Clayton County ruling on my birthday in 2020, actually, June 15th, 2020. Thanks. And, the idea that that it's still not written into many states' laws is unfathomable to me. I don't quite understand, and it's hard to wrap my head around. So yeah.
Yeah, because I think once you get kind of deeper into it, right, we think of what the protected classes are in terms of workplace discrimination, and they say gender, race, sex, religion, so on and so forth. And at the very core of it, I guess you have to determine, do you consider transgender a sex, not issue, but rather a sex category? And then from a legal standpoint, I guess, are you supposed to uphold that as a valid form of discrimination, right? So I'm very glad to, that the 2020 case was put to court and kind of determined that transgendered people, that they do deserve the workforce rights that any other person in a protected class also do.
It does surprise me, though. I guess one of the, sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that does surprise me about that is when we think about protected classes, it strikes me as it strikes me as a cop out in a way, because we're talking about people, right? Human beings. And why do we have to actually put into law have these laws to make people see that, to make people why would you discriminate against anybody? Right?
In a perfect world,
it makes
right?
no sense. I know. I do often go on the idealistic viewpoint, but it stresses me out to see, that this is a livelihood. This is Michelle's job, right? She is capable doing great things and has like a huge track record in that. Like she's a star in her firm, and they let her go for what?
Right, exactly. I totally agree with you. And just reading through it, I felt like a little bit of like sticker shock or horror at even hearing that this is something that could even be considerable to happen in the first place. I mean, like you said, she had, a various skill set, she had a proven track record, no sort of disciplinary problems before, and then for this just be pulled out under her. That's her entire life. And you think about like jobs like this, like especially, high income kind of white collar work, the health benefits that are provided to transgender people are such an important, like life-saving amount of medication, of doctor's visits, of so like you think about the healthcare also now being slipped out from under her. You have to think, well, not only did you just ruin her chance, like you might ruin her chances of like making mortgage or rent. Now you're also ruining chances of just her life. That's like her whole gender identity is now something that might come under fire. I think it's a really good point here to maybe answer some of the questions in the case study, because I think that those are also really interesting kind of what if isms. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on them.
On the what ifs?
Yeah, let's go for it.
I first want to just comment too on your what you just said about the health benefits and how, I mean, people rely on these benefits for, medication and whatnot. But, the other side of this, to be scrutinized or to be let go for being transgender or what, that's like taking that person's livelihood away from them, right? Which causes stress and anxiety, which is also directly affects a person's long-term health outcomes. And so really, there's so many, I mean, that this is just like, sort of uncovering some of these really
It's like tip of the iceberg here,
yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, you just go deeper and deeper and realize that this is not just, somebody was just let go or somebody wasn't, granted rights of non-discrimination. This is it's so deep and so
Systemic,
damaging.
transphobic, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
definitely, absolutely. And even such a bigger issue today, considering the current administration and kind of the view towards gender and sex and like the very uncertain future that transgender people have to face. I'm a gay male myself. I belong to the LGBT community. I have transsexual friends, female to male, assigned male at birth, and they're scared, right? Like we're not just talking about livelihood. We are talking about things like long-term mental health. We're talking about safety and security. Some of them don't even feel like supported by our government in a way that makes them even want to be proud to be an American, right? And that's a sad thing because our tenets are, land of the free, right? Like everyone should be treated with the same amount of dignity and like self-authorship and respect that everyone else deserves. So absolutely, Michelle.
Yeah. So the case study questions in the book, the first one was letting Michelle go the right thing to do. I think you and I both agreed. Like,
oh no, absolutely,
definitely
absolutely,
not.
we should have let her go. Oh wait, what? No, I'm kidding. No, that's ridiculous. That's such a ridiculous concept to to just fire someone over coming out of the closet, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't understand how like this didn't go up beyond her manager's position, right? Like there should have been some sort of board review or something happen at the organizational level to prevent something like this from happening, for sure.
The other thing I think about this in this case study was that Michelle was, started to grow her hair and try to embrace her identity and her gender, and but didn't sound like it from the case study, and we don't know all of the ins and outs, but I do wonder, when you are doing something like that, like not having the support of the HR team or the organization is obviously going to be like a super huge challenge. But I think if there is a good program or support net in place for transgender in the workplace, it may have been easier for her through that process. And also, in addition, we think about how education can help, right? It can help people understand what this transition is for Michelle, right? And so developing sort of educational programs for other employees in the organization so that they're familiar with this and don't react in the way that they have reacted, which is, using derogatory term, really bullying, and harassment. Like, they just created this toxic, work environment for Michelle. And again, like, you'd think, even if Michelle wasn't a star employee, like, this is a person, like, it's hard to believe that people do that. So
I think there's something I definitely want to respond to here, and I think it's actually something very important. I know for me, as a gay male, as part of the community myself, I don't feel like I should ever have to educate someone, right? Like, in order for, like, you should be doing the research on yourself, or there should be programs out there that help you. So I can't even imagine, like, would Michelle have to explain, what her new gender identity is? Would she have to explain her medical process, right? Like, no, that's something that's private to her, right? Like, I'm not going to tell you why I'm gay, or like educate you on like the Stonewall riots or things like that. Like, I'm not wasting my time, first of all, and second of all, it's a charged subject. Like, do your research, like, figure out what's going on before you start having conversations. Like, have a chip on the table if you're going to come and start asking things about that sort of thing. And I think that, like, employee resource groups and HR groups or HRD areas should be like investigating kind of what are like the psychologically safe ways to talk about these things in the workplace and create awareness and cut back and bite back on some of that, that internalized homophobia and transphobia that obviously permeated within this case.
yeah. Yeah, and just to be clear, like, I don't think it falls on the individual who is gay or transgender. I think it falls on us as a society or us as an organization to educate our people, right? Like, we have to start somewhere. And I think when you start to learn more about these subjects, you want to learn. I find myself wanting to learn more, right? And so we have to start somewhere. And again, in society, in our schools, and even in our grade schools, our elementary schools and high schools and whatnot, and colleges, really just laying those seeds of change and growth and education so that people want to learn more. And I don't think we're there. I think that there's, there are a lot of people who have no desire. They don't, want to learn anything. And so then we're faced with, these toxic work environments, hate
Communities.
crimes. Yeah.
Totally.
The other question in here was, as an HRD professional, how would you have handled Michelle's case?
I think we kind of touched a little bit on that, right?
Yeah.
We need better programs in place. We need better safety nets. There's legality nowadays to protect from that. So, like, HR, an HR professional would definitely be brought in to the table. Especially if there was an exit interview. I can't even imagine what type of things would go on during that type of meeting. Anyone with any corporation or organization with a strong anti-harassment policy would have and could have and would have caught this on the first day that she received a post-it note on her desk, basically, calling her awful discriminatory things.
Right. And just, again, like, kind of going back to that idea where Michelle really just started, growing her hair. As an HR professional, you have to be observing and being aware, you have to observe and be aware of your surrounding and what's going on in the organization. And, having, as an HR professional, having a really solid understanding of what this transitional process is for a transition process is for a transgender individual, right? I think the book said that it's like a 12-stage process for transgender individuals to go through. And I mean, not all of them go through those same processes, but you, as an HR professional, you really should have a grasp on what that is and what it looks like, and to be able to support, Michelle, for this situation through that process in the organization.
Absolutely. And if you don't know, research. Like, it doesn't take that much to pick up a book these days. I mean, Google something, chat GPT, like how do I, know if a coworker is transgender? I'm sure you can find something like very quickly to pop up and kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive into it before, it even gets any further than it needs to get. Right.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And, I did say this whole, I said it, now I'm like backpedaling here, but this idea of, as an HR professional, being able to see and observe. So what we see and what we observe may not be what we think we're seeing and we're observing. So really just paying attention, and actually better yet is to really develop those strong programs as a preemptive, way to support whatever may come your way, instead of sort of this reactive program. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, the reality of it is, and like, again, like I'm identifying myself here, having lived through the experience of being a gay male, like people are not going to know things. And like from the other side of the aisle too, as long as you have like good faith, as long as you have like good intention, right? And you're thinking about like an HRD practitioner who's maybe never met a transgender person, right? I would probably feel myself more comfortable knowing in a good faith kind of argument that they're trying to learn more, question, right?
yeah,
Again, it's not my role to teach you, but if I know that you're trying to put in the effort to understand, I'm more than happy to like sit down and have a conversation about like what I think. And, and I respect that my intersectionalities are not going to be the same as someone else's intersectionality. You think about, maybe Hispanic gay male, right? He would have a very different understanding of what it is to be a gay male than I would, right? Because of the things that he's probably grown up with. And that's not even stereotyping. It's just everyone has a different upbringing and a different background that's going to intersect with how like their non-conforming gender or sexuality is probably going to play into things.
definitely. So the next question is the question that is a challenging question. How do you feel about transgender individuals? And I say challenging, for me, I want to be respectful in however I communicate, and I would never want to place somebody, put somebody in an uncomfortable position or offend them in any way. And so, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with actual personal relations, but I have experienced transgender in my workplace for like more than 30 years. So, 30 years ago, um, there we had transgender individuals in our workplace, and at the time I was pretty young and I didn't know what that was. And, I didn't really pay much attention to it. I was friendly, but I could tell that this person was isolated, socially isolated. And that's sad. I mean, at that time, I didn't know what to do. I don't think I would be I think I would try more to sort of bring that person into, my social conversations or whatever now. But again, like I didn't know anything about transgender individuals back then. And so I just, I did not bully, or I'm just not that person. I just didn't know what to do. And, then I think there was something else that I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was. So
It's okay. It's totally okay. No, 30 years, like I can't, like the world was such a different place 3 years ago too. And there have been so many strides. Even you think of just simply like 2 men or 2 women getting married since then has been made possible, right?
yeah.
So it's come a long way. I definitely think that our community has a lot more to go.
Hmm.
And how I view transgender people, it's a very divisive, from what I've observed, it's a very divisive topic, even in our own like LGBT plus community. I know that there are a lot of gay men out there that particularly do have problems with transgender people, especially the ones that have transitioned to like femalehood and are expected to like be able to date gay men. Like it creates a lot of weird and uncomfortable spaces where kind of negativity comes and is brought out from. Me myself personally, like gender is gender, right? If you're a woman, you're a woman. If you're a man or a man, I don't, that doesn't matter to me. I want to protect your rights. I want to make sure that you have a chance to be happy and healthy. Like
Hmm.
my own sexuality and my preference is not to, fall in love with a transgendered person, but that's okay, right? Like everyone has an understanding of like what is right for them and what's not right for them.
Right.
And as long as we're like coming to the core of what's not right for me isn't born out of a place of hate or discrimination, I think that's acceptable. So yeah, like I said, it's a very, very divisive topic even amongst ourselves. I've personally seen some pretty awful things said between both sides of, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transsexual communities. I think that ultimately, there's been this like tiptoeing kind of scared approach to have dialogue, like open, good faith dialogue in public, just because there is such a sensitivity around if you're transgender, like, you have all these additional things now you have to worry about. Like if you talk out, are you transphobic? And I think like people need to realize that being a good or a bad person doesn't, you know, and being transgender are mutually exclusive things. You can still be a shitty person or an awful, have awful viewpoints and still be a member of a protected class. Like, and I think that we need to just have more good faith conversations about lived experiences to understand what that really looks like.
Definitely. And really, I think what you said earlier about it, it's a gender, right? Like that's that person's gender, their choice for this, right? And that is not, you know, I wouldn't think that I don't know this, but I wouldn't think that transgender would, it's not about a sexual attraction necessarily, right? This is like about gender, right? And so this idea and this conversation that people have, or these thoughts that people have about the sexual side of transgender, is it's taking it to a point that, like, for me, it like what you said before, it's not, everybody has their right to choose what, gender they want to be attracted to or they are attracted to, right? And so that to me is like a side piece, that we're talking about like this gender of this person who
Right.
is
That
transitioning.
deserves the same respect as a,
Exactly.
as a human being, just deserves respect and dignity that everyone else deserves as well.
Exactly. And I know what I was going to say earlier was the when I think about transgender individuals, like I have so much respect for their courage and their bravery, because there's so much hate and um and you know what, I don't even know, there's just so much hate um toward toward them, that it's you understand where it comes from. That comes from who that person is. And so, like, this whole identity to have the courage to be that person when nobody else believes that that's you, right? Like that's your person. I don't know, it's
Right.
hard for me to articulate that piece
No,
of
it
it,
is.
but
I agree, and it's been very compounded as a political weapon lately too,
mhm, mhm.
which just begets more hate. Honestly, so I'm a liberal, if you can't tell,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to see so many backwards sentiments coming from, again, our government, both at the local, state, and federal level. It's really sad to see.
It is sad. Um, And then the last question in the case study here is how might you advocate for future transgender employees at this firm? And I think we also covered,
Right.
that substantially, but really, focusing on programs, preemptive programs, programs in place so that people are both trained and have an understanding of this transition for people, and for people transitioning, that they're supported by their organization and they're not fired for their choice to live their true selves. So
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I'm very much the type of person that would stand up for another employee. Like even in my own role, I'm part of an equality council. I'm part of Outforce, which is our local ERG program for LGBT plus communities
mhm,
within our, within our organization. And we have had situations where we've looked at things um, like promotion biasness and stuff like that, and been able to take a look at workplace data and say, is it more likely for a Black woman to not get a promotion over a white man? Like we've had some of these like investigations, and you have to be able to advocate for it. And once you find like a root cause, and once you find substantive evidence, you don't stop there. You have to do something actionable about it. And if I were in that organization, first of all, I would never be in that organization. I probably wouldn't last a week.
right,
But
yeah,
I wouldn't. I would not even consider the manager. I would go to the manager's manager at that point, because this is a systemic problem. It's not just you have one bad apple. You have people in the office that are literally putting notes on someone's desk, like calling you fag, like these awful things, right? And then, on top of that, when you think of just from a client perspective, for that person, and we don't even know if it's true, whether or not the client feels uncomfortable with having a transgender person working on their account, right? Like, well, then should you drop those clients? Like, do you really need them? You know what I mean? Like, business is a platform for change, and if you're not using that change, then what are you doing? You know?
right. And also, I mean, I think in a lot of organizations that I've worked in, and I'm sure Salesforce does something similar, is really tracking and making sure that their vendors do have their own, um, policies, programs, and whatnot in place, and they have anti-discrimination policies and harassment policies that align to your organization, right, or to what your values are
Yeah,
before you go.
they're flat out, absolutely, they're flat out organizations we won't do business with if they are too heavily politicized, if they have some of the obvious ones, like are they engaged with trade with Russia, things
Mhm.
like, there's all sorts of things that would kind of put what we call a legally denied party in consideration, that we wouldn't do business with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, just, in 2008, I was part of a diversity, equity, and inclusion program or department in an organization, financial services. And we had a huge economic downturn at that time, as you might know from history or whatever. And many people lost their jobs. And I, in my organization, the diversity, equity, and inclusion programming was slashed immediately. Like it was the
Yeah.
first, group to go, and it really disappointed me. And so I am maybe slightly cynical about any DEI programs that are going on in organizations, and when they, start to look at like how individuals are, not promoting, right, based on gender, race, um, uh, sexual identity. They don't. They look at that, but we're still here. Like, I mean, this is what, 15 years later, or whatever it is, 20, whatever. I can't do the math in my head. It's been a while.
Time stopped after COVID-19 for everyone, so
Yeah,
we're all still
right.
kind of living in the back end of that.
So, but we're still talking about these conversations and organization. I mean, and I'm glad that it is, and I'm glad that it's been reignited in these organizations. But I do wonder, like, how a program like so important could be slashed so readily, and would that happen again today? I mean,
I
we
think
see that.
I think it is. I think it is
Yeah.
happening as we speak. um, there is definitely this like tokenism about LGBT rights, like
Mhm.
rainbow washing, right? And companies do take advantage of it. They want to, in a climate where everyone is extremely accepting and wanting to promote the values of diversity, equity, inclusion, they're going to tokenize that, right? They're going to use that as part of a marketing ploy or marketing, and they're not necessarily committed to really standing by it in the times where it's really needed, right?
Mhm.
So it's these companies and organizations that at mid and high levels that you see people actually doing things within the communities that they're operating in, right? And I think back, and I don't want to keep drinking the Salesforce Kool-Aid too much, but like one of the things like that I studied in college as a case study on Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, was that it was approached to him that there was a significant pay gap between men and women in Salesforce, and he went to his HR department and said, all right, we need to study all of this. I want to see all the deltas. I want to understand why this is happening.
Mhm.
And because of that, he gave a pay gap raise to every female at Salesforce to make sure that there wasn't a disparity just because of your gender, in how you got paid or how you kind of got compensated, whether or not through commission or straight just bonus, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, like the ones you need to look out for, the ones that are actually doing things and not just saying that they're doing things, and the ones that aren't going to pull all of their pride merchandise off the shelf Target,
Yeah.
just because you're getting public backlash on it, right? So
Yeah.
we see that, we understand it, and you see companies like, they put their and now this is just me ranting, but they put like the rainbow colors and all their logos, and then when you visit like that specific website from like Saudi Arabia or like a Muslim country where it's like illegal to be gay in public, right? Those logos are no longer pride flags,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
about profit, and it always will be about profit. But like this organization specifically, they're putting obviously profit over people, and that's not the right thing to do ever. Um, and just to be so grossly adamant about not defending your own people says a lot more about the organization than anything else, right? Like,
Yeah.
look at retention rates, look at um, how long people stay with the company. If you have a good corporate culture, they stay longer. They're not willing to run away from the organization screaming, right? So it's just like all these things that support more healthier, more diverse and more equitable places to work.
Yeah. And then, we think about too, like just this idea of um, this tokenism. I mean, I think we as a society really need to vote with our feet in those situations, right? Like, I mean, I think a lot of people did stop shopping at Target, for example, for those for the stance that they made, or for pulling off those advertisements. And but we do have more power than we think we have, I think, sometimes. And collectively, if we're making this stand against this, then maybe there can be change. There's my idealism coming out again.
No, I love that, and I think back to I recently saw Josh Johnson, who is a stand-up comedian. I don't know if you saw him. He works for the Daily Show, and now he's kind of becoming a stand-up comedian. And he was
Mhm.
talking, kind of abysmally about the world, and doing a lot of like turns and like jokes on like the state of things and the way that they are. But towards the end of the presentation, or towards the end of the stand-up bit, he basically concluded with, the only way that we're going to get through this is by community, right? Like, go to your neighbor's house and ask them, are you okay? Do you need help? Is there something going on, right? Because at the end of the day, it's really the communities that we build that are actually going to move things towards a better tomorrow. It's not going to come from the top down.
Yeah. And smiling at people. I mean, I think we actually had this conversation the other
I think
day.
so. Yeah, yeah.
Really smiling at people. We're in this world where people are really, I think, especially after COVID, people are really internal now more than ever, more than I've seen in my lifetime, where it's really just like, looking down when walking in the street, and not really interacting with the people around. I see it often anyway, but I always put a smile out. And sometimes I'll see individuals that really look sad or angry or whatever, and I still, smile, and they smile back, and the light in their face it's wonderful to see it, right? And so even, like in an organization where we have people who are different than we are, embracing them, bringing them into, social circles, learning more about their experience, and asking them about their lived experience, understanding and sharing, because, we all have our lived experiences, and, there is a lot of commonality in that, because we're people, and we are always, scanning the world for things that are familiar, or things that are comfortable, or, or non-threatening, or,
Right.
whatever we're scanning for. Um, but we're all doing that, right? We're all doing that, and so sharing these lived experiences, I think, is a value, and understanding others' lived experiences. So
Absolutely. I think we're at about 40 minutes now. So let's just I'll do a quick wrap up, and then
yeah,
we can kind of maybe call it a day. All right. So we talked a lot about the case. We answered the 4 questions. We provided some micro level analysis around identity development, intersectionality, cultural norms and views towards LGBT communities. We talked a lot about psychological safety, about having to be able to express yourself and bring your whole self to work is incredibly important. We talked about authenticity versus survival. A lot of these concepts have come up also as well. From a meso level, we talked about the hostile work environment, these coworker dynamics that are creating a lack of HR readiness, allyship, and bystander accountability. Um, you know, we have how coming out was such a gradual thing for Michelle, that there was no structure on policy in place to help her go through the things that she was going through. And people are just in general afraid of differences and afraid of really reaching out and kind of understanding. And we talked a lot about the macro level too, I think, from not just an organization level, but a societal level, government level, local, federal, right? We talked about the structural inequality that exists within the organization and outside of the organization, lack of policy protection, some of the dominant cultural norms that exist out there today that we've seen in our lived experiences, including Michelle, you having a transgender coworker 30 years ago, right, in a different climate that is entirely a totally different world today. We talked a little bit about how the Supreme Court has ruled on protection of class based on gender identity. And then really, just kind of want to pose it out to anyone who's listening. How does this case expose some of the gaps in your life? What are you experiencing between, perceived and expected realities of what people are perceiving gender to be? Do you consider yourself an ally? Would you stand up for someone in this situation like Michelle, who didn't have a voice, for someone who was let go for just being herself? So thank you, Michelle, so much. It was really, really fun talking to you and getting to know you. Again, I think you bring in like such a fresh perspective. I feel so empowered by your positivity, and I even said this before. Like, I'm happy to be an open book for this, and like no question is off the table for you, and just to feel comfortable talking to me. And I really appreciate that. We've had the chance to do this.
me too. This was a great conversation. I do have one question though. When I was in the diversity, equity, and inclusion worlds in my job, at that time the acronym was LGBTQA for ally, and I wonder if you have any perspective on like why the A is really no longer there.
I think like the long form of it right now, acceptably, is LGBTQIA plus.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I typically will just say LGBT plus. Like, I think it encompasses all of queer identity, right? And that's really what it is. It's queer identity. It's
Yeah.
self-expression in sexuality, in outlooks towards gender, and like the norms that are kind of surrounding that. And that includes people that are off the deviant, like off not deviant, sorry, deviating from the normal
Yeah.
spectrum, of sexuality, right? Like asexual, pansexual. I think the LGBT plus just kind of is an umbrella for all of that. But yeah, I would like to see allies, as many as we can.
Allies are important. You know, for me, I mean, I identify as an ally for people, for everybody, right? Like I want to support everyone. But it just struck me because I haven't seen it. I don't see it as I used to see it in the acronym, and it was a big
Yeah.
part of who I was at that time. And so, I mean, who
And
I
you can even
am.
see it in our you can even see it in our textbook. It just says LGB for the most part when it's kind of talking about it, and it's interesting, right? Because like, what are the social norms? I mean, this is an another conversation,
Sorry,
right? Like,
yeah.
we go back and forth between, is it acceptable to call someone African American, or is it okay to say Black? And you know, I think we're just going to continue to evolve as we have these conversations. You know, just because that's the nature of how language works, right?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, the book also talks about transsexual and transgender interchangeably, and
right.
But they did say, you know, that transsexual is not the preferred term to use, but it's, I mean, I think that was maybe like a historical term or the OG, or I don't know.
Yeah, write a book about sexuality. It's going to change in 6 months anyway. So
yeah. I think it's good that they changed it, though, just based on, you know, the conversation that we were having earlier, is this idea of it not being about this sexual part, right? Like this is person's identity, their gender identity. Like this is and aside, I mean, there might be this other intersectionality that is happening, but we're not, I mean, we don't know that. Like I don't ask people, you know, who they want to sleep with.
Are you trans? Do you sleep with other trans men? Do you sleep with, you know, like, yeah,
like
no,
that's not even
too
part
much.
of the conversation.
Yeah.